Hi, everybody. Welcome to Connect. It's good to have you here. Last night we had a partner reception, and we were meeting with partners, and I kept hearing over and over again just how fast things are changing and how many more people are interested in everything we're doing around Connect. And just the change in 1 year. And it's amazing just to see the number of people that are here, partners, customers, folks that are looking at the technology, figuring out where we're going to go with it all. And one thing that I was thinking about as you kind of look around the room here is everybody is here to improve something. You're either working on a legacy system and trying to improve it and modernize it, or you're deploying brand new technology and new features and new functionality and transforming your businesses and even your industries. And that's why you're here. You're here to learn about that and figure out how we're going to work together to make that happen. And what we wanted to do is kind of look back a little bit and think about how things have changed. And we kind of wanted to look way, way back. So we went to, looked at what happened over a very long period of time. So an economist did an analysis of the gross domestic product globally going back to 10,000 BC. So we just, in the UK, I think we ought to go way, way back, right? So went back to 10,000 BC, and for those in the back that may not be able to tell, that's actually a line down at the bottom. That's not the axes. So the line at the bottom there is kind of the progress we saw over a 12,000 year period, and basically nothing happened, right? 12,000 years, lots of inventions during that period of time. So agriculture, irrigation, metal making, metallurgy, learning to use water for power, printing press, all of these big innovations happened. And despite all of that progress in a 12,000 year period, life remained short. The average lifespan up until 1800 worldwide was around 35 years. It was short lives, short heights. People were hungry. It was difficult. 12,000 years, and then everything before that was probably even worse. But 12,000 years of struggle. And what starts getting interesting is what happened around 1800, and it really started around here, is the Industrial Revolution happened. Between 1800 and 1900, even though that still looks like fairly small, it's tremendous growth in a 100-year period of time. So in 100 years, we had a 3x improvement in our lifestyles, 3x improvement in our ability to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, tremendous change driven by the Industrial Revolution. And it's not lost on us that a lot of that was driven around connectivity. Connectivity and standardization. The Industrial Revolution was all about standardizing how things are done, and connectivity being two key inventions, steam locomotive and the telegraph, to basically move goods and services around, or goods and people around, and the telegraph to move information. And that connectivity, we believe, is what really started changing and driving this curve way north. And then what really gets exciting is what happened over the next 100 years. So 12,000 years of recorded of analysis by the economists, all of a sudden of nothing changing, and then in 200 years, we have a 30x increase in our lifestyles, 30x. And that was driven by continued changes in the Industrial Revolution. We had a second Industrial Revolution just before World War I, all of the changes in the communications, transportation, and then finally the information revolution that continued to drive us up this curve. So how do we keep, and the question really for everybody in this room and for society as a whole, is how do we keep going up this curve, right? And what we did when we went up this curve for the past 200 years is we got exceptionally good at pulling things out of the oceans and pulling things out of the earth and extracting natural resources, and we got good at that. But what we have to do in the next 100 years or 200 years is figure out how to do it more sustainably. How do we continue to drive the growth in this curve with increasing populations? How do we do that in a way that we can still coexist in this world with the earth, with our environment? And that's really the challenge. How do we get better at what we're doing, not just doing more of the same thing? And that's why I think, if you really step back and think about what you're doing every day, well, sometimes it might feel like, hey, I'm just working on this banking application or this insurance application or this healthcare application. But at the end of the day, everybody in this room that's working on these types of things is continuing to drive us up this curve of prosperity and really the world as a whole. So you should feel very good about what you're doing every day, even though sometimes it can feel really difficult, right? Really difficult to wrestle with all these different technologies that we have to make work. So if we think about that information revolution, it is amazing when I talked about how far we've come in just the last year. It's interesting to look at how far we've come in the last 60 years. So if you go back and you look at one of the first computers, the ENIAC, this computer occupied a large room. The lore is that when they turned this computer on, that the lights would dim in the city. And it did very, very basic computing. And then you fast forward just a few years, 60 years, kind of in the scheme of all the time that we're looking at. You fast forward 60 years. Can anybody want to take a guess about who this is and where this person is? What was it? A crop sprayer? Yeah, that's close. It's exactly right. It's a farmer, and it's a farmer in his tractor. And if you think about what that guy is able to use now to optimize, he's optimizing his pesticide spraying, he's optimizing how he's planting, he's using GPS systems to plant the rows exactly the correct distances apart based on the weather predictions for the year. All of that technology now is in a farmer's hands. Just in 60 short years, we've moved that far. It's pretty amazing. We believe that it's going to go even further and even faster in the next 10 years. And we think that that's going to happen by changes in connectivity. So if we kind of go back and we think about 1960s, the era of mainframe computing. In the 80s, were kind of the dawn of personal computing. In kind of around 2000, internet computing takes off. In recent years, mobile becomes kind of the next wave of computing. But where we see this all going and why we name this conference Connect is, we think where it's all going to go in the near future is something we're calling connected computing. The value that's being created is how all of this is going to now fit together. We have communications technology almost free at this point, storage nearly free, compute power nearly free. And now the real challenge is how are we going to connect this together? How are we going to connect our mobile devices? How are we going to connect our apps? How are we going to connect everything together to kind of make the sum greater than all of those parts? And that's really what this couple of days is all about. So talking about those parts, and this is what's really exciting for us, is those parts are just exploding. All of those endpoints that have to be connected are going through the roof. So 2000, almost no SaaS apps. 2014, there's over 2,000 companies that are delivering and selling SaaS applications. Just imagine that. It went from 0 to 2,000 in just a decade, a little over a decade. And then APIs. So in 2005, there were only 100 public APIs. And they were the names that you'd imagine, the names you'd think about. Amazon, Yahoo, some of those early internet companies had APIs, but only 100 of them in 2005. Now there's over 10,000 public APIs growing every single day. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg with APIs. Companies now are exposing APIs internally. So there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of APIs that they're using internally to completely transform their organizations, and then trying to figure out how we're going to use those APIs to now communicate with our partners, with our customers, with our employees, with our patients, with our students. All of those APIs become tools for the business to start communicating and collaborating with their extended outside the firewall partners. And then finally, connected devices. The prediction is that by 2020, we're going to have 50 billion connected devices. 50 billion. And so it's what we'd expect with mobile phones, but also you start adding in there, you start adding refrigerators and houses and cars and pacemakers and watt-hour meters, and every single light bulb at some point will have an IP address. We can connect to every single one of these devices. All of those become endpoints that we can use to be more efficient and to increase our productivity. Right, so we've got all of these connectivity opportunities, all of these endpoints that we can now connect to. it presents a tremendous opportunity. So I want to cover 3 industries that I see as having some of the biggest impact on society as a whole, but also having the biggest opportunity to be completely transformed by this connectivity challenge and opportunity. So let's start with healthcare. If you went into a modern day operating room, you might see something like this. You'd see a touchscreen monitors and some great diagnostic tools, and this looks like a modern day hospital, and that's great, and we've gotten better at giving care to patients using some of these technologies, but it hasn't really changed, right? The model of how we're delivering healthcare is still when somebody has a problem, by and large, we deal with that problem, and that's what the healthcare system does, is it kind of intervenes after the fact and tries to fix whatever that problem is. And where we're moving is to something where we talk about electronic medical records, electronic health records, and that is, hey, let's figure out a way that we can have all of this information about the patient in one place. So we're not kind of operating in silos. So we don't have one doctor thinking one thing, and the nurse has other information, and a specialist has other information. Let's pull it all together. Let's have all the lab results in one place so we can work more quickly and we don't make medical mistakes. So there's lots of good things about that, and that's kind of, a lot of times when you hear folks talk about kind of where healthcare is going, they're thinking about it in those terms, and that's great, and we will get there, and that's going to be a big improvement, but we think it can go much, much further than that. Right? We believe that we can get to a place that we call the connected patient. When we have a place where everything about you is known by the system, and obviously there's lots of privacy issues that we have to think through and deal with to make that happen, but imagine if you've got a patient, and that patient, everything that's happening around that patient is being fed back. So the immediate vital signs are there, you know about DNA, the DNA of the patient, where they may have problems cropping up in the future, the medications that they're on, and any kind of therapies that they're on, and all of that information is being fed back in real time and predicting where problems might occur. In fact, some of this is already happening. So there's one university that has developed an app. So it's amazing what can go into an app. They have an app now that resides on the iPhone. It taps into the accelerometer on the iPhone, and it can tell by the way you're walking if you're starting to have some early symptoms of Parkinson's disease. It can just look for the gait in your walk and tell if you're kind of going down the path towards Parkinson's, and then try to get ahead of it, obviously with therapies and medication to get ahead of that problem. So that is kind of just the beginning of where we can get to with a connected patient. Okay, next, hugely transformative opportunity and industry that I would argue probably has the highest leverage to anybody's future, and that's education. So this is kind of a modern day classroom, and it's probably a fairly typical metaphor for how classrooms have worked for hundreds of years. You have a teacher up in the front, and you have a group of kids, and there's a wide range of engagement of the students in that classroom. So the 2 boys in the back over there, I think I would have been one of them. Show of hands if anybody here would have been the folks in the back. I noticed that the back of the rooms actually has a higher number of hands up. Yeah, so that's the metaphor that we're working under, and it hasn't changed in hundreds of years. That classroom still looks the same. That teacher gets up in the morning. This is a small classroom. You think about a teacher who's teaching a class of 20, 30 students, and they get up in the morning and they're thinking, okay, how do I teach to the middle? I've got to teach to the middle. I've got to teach the bulk of the students. So if I have 30 children in my classroom, I'm going to teach to 20 of them that get it. 5 of them are going to be hopelessly lost. 5 of them are going to be hopelessly bored, and I have to generally kind of teach to the middle of the class and do the best job that I can. Man, that is such a tough job, but it's not changing. And what we've done, in this picture, people think about that as a modern classroom because it has a smart board, which is kind of a projector that has some touchscreen capabilities instead of an old chalkboard. But that doesn't change anything. That's not a fundamental change in how we're doing things. So fast forward to where things are going in the next few years, and you're seeing a lot of e-readers and iPads that students are starting to use now. And that is a great improvement. my kids, just the sheer size of their backpacks, I think it's better. They're not carrying around 50 pounds of books every day. That's good. But when you start looking at what they're doing, all we've done is we've switched out paper for plastic. And we've just made a change from, from doing it on paper to flipping the pages on your iPad. And there's some improvements happening. So you're starting to use some tools in the iPads that they're using to take tests and things like that. So it's getting better. But it's still, at the end of the day, it is still a very similar experience. It's still, there's a lesson plan, there's a set of tools that the teacher is using for every single student, and they're all moving along at the exact same pace. Nothing really has changed dramatically. But where we see it going is this concept, and we couldn't even find a picture actually that would depict what this looks like, but this is the best one to think about, which is, Jimmy here is let's think about him as a connected student, right? So if he's a connected student and everything about him is now being fed into the system. So the system knows that when Jimmy starts working on a set of math problems, if he misses 3 in a row, he gets really discouraged and gives up. So the system knows, hey, he's already missed 2 of them, give him a softball question so he can get it right, and he stays positive. It knows, here's what his learning style is. Is Jimmy a visual learner? Is he an audible learner? How does he like to learn? And it's checking in every single moment, figuring out what's happening. And if he's struggling that day, his teacher can come alongside him and help him out. So it's notifying the teacher, may even notify the parents if it's starting to see some changes in his performance over time. And it's basically pushing him at the exact right level. If you think about children that spend hours and hours on video games, think about what a video game is, by and large, the ones that go well. They always have levels, right? They always have levels. And why do they do that? Because nobody wants it to be too easy, and nobody wants it to be too hard, right? Those levels push you to where you're just being challenged enough to where you're feeling successful. You think about a classroom experience, completely different than that, right? Classroom experience, everybody essentially gets the same thing. You're either bored or you're lost, or maybe you're lucky and you're in the middle, right? But we could change all that with this type of technology where you have a student completely connected, and we can push them at completely different levels and give them the experience that is completely tailored to who they are. So that's what we could do with education in the future. The next major transition that we see happening is transportation. So today, you look at some of the innovations that have happened around transportation. So car ownership, that is starting to change. Instead of needing to own a car, I just have access to a car share. I can just find out where it is on my iPhone, walk over, open up the doors, and I'm in, and I don't have to own a car. Or I can use something like a car service, like Addison and Lee, or in the US we use Uber quite a bit. I can use those services to get a cab to come immediately, have a completely seamless, transparent experience for having the car come, getting out, paying. It's just all immediate, it's all easy, it's all painless. So that's kind of where we are today, big innovations that are happening in transportation. But where could that go? How much further could that go in the future? And one that, what's starting to happen with Google is they've been working on this idea of the driverless car. So the Google driverless cars now, they have a fleet of them, and they've now driven over 1 million miles without an accident. Look, Mom, no hands, 1 million miles. And that when you think about that, that gets pretty exciting, and you think about the productivity and people not, and getting rid of accidents and injuries associated with cars if you have a car that's not making the same silly mistakes that we all do. And so that's pretty profound in how that could really change. But it's still the same kind of metaphor, right? We'd still own a car, drive a car, we'd sit in it now and kind of keep our hands off the wheel instead of hands on the wheel, but it wouldn't completely change what we're doing. What if we go from having these driverless cars, what if we go to something completely different? What if we got to a situation, I know this sounds kind of Jetsons-esque, but what if we get to a situation where we have ownerless cars, right? So we have these fleet of vehicles that are basically running around, and the second you walk out of your house or walk out of your office, they're just there to pick you up. It's all driverless, all automated. They control themselves. They're autonomous vehicles that run around. It's being done. It's been done. I mean, Disneyland and Disney World did this in 1960 with their monorail systems. It's been done for 50 years. It gets more complicated, obviously, when you deal with roads and pedestrians and all the other things, but we have the technology now to go do that. So what if we have this connected car that knows where you're going, understands people that are going to the same places you are and can pick them up and save money and fuel by doing that, connected into other cars on the road. So you can imagine 100 driverless cars driving down the road all right behind each other, so they're sharing the wind. They're basically, the one in front is they're drafting behind the one in front. All these opportunities to increase that productivity and fuel efficiency, all just kind of there waiting for us. And the driverless car is just the beginning of that. So imagine if we get to that situation. I mean, it's amazing the change that could happen for society just by having that kind of transportation there at our hands, cheap, free, safe, or nearly free and safe. So those are the three big ones that we see, and there's many more industries that have opportunities to change like that. And when I say in this, we're leading the charge, we as in we in this collective room, people in this room are leading this charge and transforming bit by bit those businesses and those industries to make these types of things possible. Every single day, you folks are getting up and making these things possible, and we're here to help you, and that's what this conference is all about. We have three customers in Europe, in fact, that kind of fit those industries and that are doing some of those same things with BMW around transportation, NHS, and the University of Southampton. So for education, transportation, and healthcare, we're driving that right here. And we have lots of other customers across a wide range of industries that are all basically trying to do those same things around how do we connect our entire companies together, how do we connect with our customers, how do we connect with our partners, with our employees, with our patients, with our students. How do we make that happen? So that's what we're excited about. We see just massive opportunities for change and improvement, and we feel like the time is right with all the technology to go do that.